Welcome. Well, this video is going to be about history, my personal history. We all have our stories. We all have our life events, life experiences that helped to program and form the person that we are today. I feel in many ways we come into the world with certain leanings, certain aspects of our heart and personality somehow already in place, and they will grow and blossom. But at the same time, life experiences can also benefit or also have a negative impact on who we are and who we're becoming, the different challenges we face along the way. I believe, through my own experience, that everyone has a story. I mean, that may seem obvious. Of course, everyone has a story. I actually met someone once who didn't believe that, whatever. I believe that everyone is interesting. Now, Bob or Mary or Joe or Martha or Xingquan or whatever may not believe that their story is interesting because it's their story. It's just their experience, and to them it's commonplace. It's what happened. But I believe that from the outside looking in, that most stories are very interesting. Interesting to me, anyway. So I'm going to share my story. I'm going to start at this one place when I was 10, and I'm thinking I'm going to then go back to the beginning and create different videos relating to the different chapters of the book that I've been writing over the years in relation to my own autobiography. So we're going to start off now when I was 10 years old, and this is going to take us here. Let's see if I can get that there. And let's see, can I do that? It's kind of challenging to get that in there. The reason I'm showing you this building is because this is where this story will be taking place. Now, I've previously written this, and I'm going to just read what I've written, perhaps with a few commentaries. I hope you find it interesting. It's, of course, a true story, being my story. The picture you just saw, that was Hampden County Training School. It was a reform school for delinquent boys from 1917 until it was closed in 1972. The year was 1967 in the United States. I was 10 years old, handcuffed to a heating pipe in the basement of the courthouse. How did I get here? Where did it all begin? How did I end up incarcerated / in reform school / child prison / child jail when I was only 10 years old? A little background I think it probably all started when I was just very little. I was around 3 years old. At the time of this writing, I'm not exactly remembering my age, but most likely 3 is correct, or close enough. Before my birth, my mother had fallen down some stairs and received a concussion, and in time, that head injury led to hallucinations, etc. Sometimes I would awake from my nap and she would be gone. I would then leave the apartment and go out into the world to find her. It very rapidly reached a point where I would try not to sleep. I would really try not to sleep because I wasn't sure if she would be there when I awoke. Sometimes I would find her, and sometimes I would not. Sometimes it was easy to bring her home, but mostly it was not. Sometimes I felt she was in some kind of danger, and the struggle to bring her home became even more imperative than ever before. When I began school, I was very worried about her because I wasn't home anymore to find her when she wandered off on an adventure. So I decided to just stand and wait in the doorway that led out of the apartment downstairs. From there, I thought that if she were to leave the building, I could follow her and I could try to protect her from any misadventures. There is more to this part of the story, but I guess this paints enough background for understanding where this adventure shall lead us next. And so, jumping ahead in time, a pattern of skipping school was long ago established. From very early on, I decided that I hated school, but I loved museums and sculpture and painting, etc. I loved reading and big libraries. Instead of going to school, I would visit the places that I loved. I would wander through the museums and libraries in my city. And one of the museums had a planetarium. I loved it so much. Sounds like I'm reading something because I'm reading something, but seriously, I loved it very much. That was one of my favorite places to go. I would just like blend in with different groups that would be going in. Like I remember a Boy Scout troop that went there, and different school classes would go there, and I would be there, and I would just walk in too. Also, I would just explore the city, find different streets and walk and walk and walk. I found it enjoyable and interesting. Long story short, when I was 10 years old, the government brought me to court. It seems that children are not allowed to educate themselves. I had broken the law by my lack of attendance at school. I was 10 years old. The sentence I received from the judge was to serve 6 years in what they called a training school. What? Hey, wait a minute. This can't be right. But it was. I really didn't expect it. I didn't think they would really do it. I mean, what had I done? I had visited museums and libraries and had long, interesting, and enjoyable walks of contemplation instead of going to their old, boring, and confining schools. But here I was. It was apparently really happening. I was handcuffed to a heating pipe in the cellar of the courthouse while awaiting transport to the training facility. Maybe this is all just designed to scare me. Yeah, that's it. Well, it's working. I'm crying my eyes out. Maybe soon they will just let me go home when they know they have scared me enough. Nope. They were just waiting for a few other kids to ride in the same transport to be taken to the training facility. JDs. JDs, that's what we were called. JD was the acronym for juvenile delinquent. Okay, want to hear something kind of funny? My crime was skipping school, remember? Just not going to school and hanging out, visiting museums, libraries, having walks, right? Well, I was the only one that was locked up in this place for such a ridiculous reason. The other inmates were in there for real crimes, such as bank robbery, assault and battery, etc. This place had kids from around 8 to 16 years old. When a kid turned 16, they would ship them to another facility with older kids. Oh my God. I was actually sentenced for the whole term. Come on, I was 10. The judge sentenced me till I was 16. That's 6 years. I soon discovered that most of the other children were sentenced for varying and much shorter periods of time. 3 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, 1 year, etc. How could I be sentenced to be here for so long when my crime was so small? I did not understand. I mean, truly, if you can imagine, I did not understand. I stopped crying in the transport on my way there. I was now once again very much alone in the world, and I had no room for tears. I had to observe my situation and learn the new rules as quickly as I could. I was now in survival mode. I don't remember very much about my arrival. I remember being driven up to the large institutional type building. It had a large, cold, and foreboding feeling to it. I learned later that it had once been a police training facility. The first morning that I was there, I was already trying to figure out how I could escape. All of the windows were closed, locked, and fenced in. There was going to be no climbing out of a window. Everyone was always accounted for and in a large group in the main room. But I was still figuring this all out. I learned all this little by little, bit by bit. Like on that first day when they said we were going out for a work detail. This place was a large farm, and they used us as child labor to tend the fields. They lined us up to go out to work in the cabbage fields, and I became excited thinking that this could be my chance to escape. And as I read this, and of course as I wrote it a while back, this is all still fairly vivid. I can just about feel the coldness of that day out in the cabbage field, but yeah, definitely this experience left an impression, right? Anyway, back to the story. Let's see. But then I noticed, let's see, where was I? They lined us up to go out to work in the cabbage fields, and I became excited, thinking that this could be my chance to escape. But then I noticed that they lined us all up and counted us before we left the building. That's not helpful. Okay, it's a cold fall day, and now we're out in a cabbage field. My job is to pick up the heads of cabbage after they have been cut off their vine with a machete. I, of course, did not get to have the machete. I know they counted our bodies before we left the building, which means that they will probably count again before heading back inside. But if I can just work my way to the far end of the field, I may be able to get to the woods before they finish and notice that I'm gone. So slowly, I begin working my way towards the far end of the field. I don't want to attract any attention. I just have to somehow get to the woods. Thoughts are rushing through my mind. How to do it. Get far enough away and try to hide by laying down in the field. I think they will see me before I get to the woods. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe, because it's a big field. If I can just get far enough away and I lay down in a row, then they're not going to see me. I mean, I'm only 10. I'm pretty smart. I already know, if they counted the bodies coming out, they're going to count them going back in. But I just want to get away, And I know if I just run, that's not going to work. I've got a feeling that I won't make it to the woods if I just keep walking slowly. So the only thing I'm thinking of at the time is if I just lay down in a row, get far enough away and lay down in a row, maybe somehow a miracle will happen, and that'll be good enough, right? So if I do somehow manage to escape, where will I go? I don't even really know where I am, and it really is very cold. It is very cold. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is I must escape. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Keep moving towards the woods and just figure it out as I go. I'm getting pretty far now from the main part of the group when one of the older boys stops me and questions whether I should be out that far, since it's my first day. I tell him that it's all right and the officers sent me to work in that area. But I don't think he believes me, and he shouts to the officers to question my presence that far from the group. Sigh. I have it written here. Sigh. So sigh. I am called back to join the main group. So much for my escaping by way of the first work detail. Shortly after that, we are lined up and counted again and go back into the facility. Always a body count. Wherever and whenever we would go and do anything, even just moving from one section of the building to another section of the same building. Body count. How can you hide and then escape when they never leave until the second body count matches the first body count? I guess that's the point. You can't. I later discovered that anytime someone tries to escape, that everyone is punished for it. That way, the other inmates are also watching to make sure no one escapes, because they know that they will suffer if anyone gets away. But actually, even an attempted escape would cause everyone to be punished. And of course, I learned this as my stay progressed. I learned all this, which is, of course, why that kid out in the field questioned my presence that far from the main group and shouted to the officers. Now, on my first morning there, one of the officers had me clean the little windows in the French doors that were between the main holding area and the corridor into the rest of the building. Now, this turned out to be a very good thing, because when the housekeeping supervisor sends word downstairs that she needs a new houseboy, that officer sends me to go because he liked the job I did on the windows. Being houseboy, I was soon to learn, was a very big job, and capital letters on big. But it kept me, for the most part, away from working in the fields. Working in the fields was a very rough and dirty job. And the old man, I won't mention any names in this story, but he was mean. He was one of the officers, and while most of the officers could be mean to varying degrees, this old man was actually especially cruel and seriously unpredictable, unless you wanted to predict that he was going to be vicious and cruel. Then, that part's predictable, but when he's going to lay into that, you just didn't really know. Although you could sometimes anticipate it and see it coming, and then that would just basically build the stress, the terror, the horror of what's going to happen next, right? For example, he would walk along the fields where the children were working, and when he found a nice big branch, which he invariably did, and it wasn't that there was a branch in the field, there were woods along the edge of the fields, and he would walk off into the edge there and grab a branch. And he would tear the leaves off it so it was bare, and then he would walk up and down the rows, yelling faster, faster, more like faster, faster, as he beat the children on their backs, prompting them to work faster and faster. So there's that. And so, yeah, being houseboy kept me, for the most part, away from that. So, that was huge. I was in my way blessed that that officer had me clean those French doors that day, and liked the job I did, and then sent me to replace the houseboy that perhaps had left or been shipped to another facility or whatever. An opening happened, and I was given the opportunity, which I embraced. And as my journey continued, I realized, whoa, houseboy, yes, please, right? As you can imagine, the nightmares followed me for many years, even after I left this place. We all have our own stories, our own histories, and in their way, they have made us who we are today. This is just part of my story. Well, there it is. It's what I call I entitled that, I guess it doesn't matter what I entitled it as, but if I do create a new installment, I'm thinking I'll start off basically with my birth, but I wanted to begin with this one because it is especially dramatic. And once again, here's the building. And yeah, this is autobiographical. It's a true story. Like I said, I believe we all, in my estimation, in my way of looking at people in the world, we all have our own history, and what I perceive to be is an interesting story. I am not aware of your story. You might think it's a boring story, because it's your story and it's just what happened. But I probably would think your story was interesting. Believe it or not, there was a time when I didn't even consider that this was all that interesting. It's just what happened. There's nothing heroic, fascinating, this, that, or the other thing about it. But over time, in my looking out into the world at other people's stories, and I've enjoyed some biographies and autobiographies and so on and so forth, and just on a casual level, on occasion, asked people to share some of their story with me, and I just always find it interesting. So I came to understand that my story is interesting too. Hopefully you have found it so, and if you did like it and you'd like to, hear more, let me know, and we'll go from there. Wishing you a beautiful day. Thank you for sharing this experience with me, and bye for now.